Hey everyone. If you're seeing this, it means I've finally decided to stop being a ghost in my own story. I'm recording this from my apartment in Tribeca. It's 2 a.m. The city's quiet, but my inbox has been a war zone for the last 48 hours. The cat's out of the bag. The silent partner is silent no more. So many of you have been asking for the full, unedited story after let's call it the Thanksgiving revelation. The story of how my sister, the magnificent Harvard-educated Sophia, told me to stop playing pretend entrepreneur. And how I responded by revealing I was the anonymous source of the $150 million keeping her failing company afloat. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about silence. About the power you can build when no one is watching. And about what happens when you finally decide to speak. I'm in my home office in NYC. Where are you watching from? Let me know down below. Our family home was a stage, and every dinner was a carefully curated performance. The leading lady was always my older sister, Sophia. For years my senior, she was born with a magnetic field of perfection that pulled everyone into her orbit. She didn't just walk into a room, she made an entrance. I, on the other hand, was the stagehand, the one in the wings making sure the lights worked, largely invisible until something went wrong. My sanctuary was the garage. It was a world of tangible logic, a refuge from the unpredictable theater of family dynamics. While Sophia was practicing her acceptance speeches for student council, I was teaching myself Python. My first major project at age 12 wasn't a lemonade stand. It was a fully functional computer built from discarded parts I'd salvaged from the local dump and eBay. The day it booted up, the fan whirring to life and the monitor glowing a soft green, was a thrill I've rarely matched. I ran into the house, my hands smudged with thermal paste. "Mom, Dad. It works." My father glanced up from his newspaper. "That's nice, Zara. Sophia, tell your mother about your meeting with the principal." National Honor Society, wasn't it? The divide wasn't just emotional. It was philosophical. They saw Sophia's ambitions as real. Law, politics, business. They saw my obsession with circuits and code as a technical phase, a quirky hobby that might lead to a stable IT job one day. They didn't understand that I wasn't just using technology. I was speaking its language, learning to command it. At 16, I built a website for a local bookstore that was going under. I didn't just make it pretty. I integrated an inventory system, a loyalty program algorithm, and a targeted email marketing tool. Within 3 months, their sales were up 300%. The owner, Mr. Henderson, wrote me a check for $5,000. His hands shaking with gratitude. It was more money than I'd ever held. Felt like a god. I presented the check to my parents at dinner, a silent offering, proof that my world had value. My mother's smile was tight. "Zara, that's astonishing. But sweetheart, this is just freelance work. It's unpredictable." Sophia's internship at the mayor's office. That's a line on a resume. That's substance. The word substance hung in the air. My code, which had saved a man's livelihood, was intangible. Sophia's coffee fetching for a politician was substance. I started to understand the rules of their game, and I realized I would never win it. So I stopped trying to play. College was the great divergence. Sophia's acceptance to Harvard Business School was met with a celebratory dinner at the finest restaurant in town. My acceptance to a state school on a full-ride computer science scholarship was met with well, at least it won't cost us anything. College, I was unleashed. While Sophia was learning business theory from case studies, I was living it. I developed a data compression algorithm in my dorm room that I licensed to a cloud storage company. The initial payment was $250,000. I remember staring at the bank transfer, the sheer number of zeros feeling surreal. I didn't buy a car. I didn't tell my family. I reinvested it. I started Quantum Forge, my consultancy. I hired 2 of the smartest kids in my class, and we started solving problems that Fortune 500 companies didn't even know they had. One Christmas, Sophia held court about her financial modeling class. I mentioned that Quantum Forge had just secured a contract with a major bank. "Oh, are you building websites for banks now?" my aunt asked innocently. "Something like that," I said, catching Sophia's subtle eye roll. That was the last family gathering where I spoke about my work. I perfected the art of the polite, deflecting smile. I became a master of asking questions, of turning the spotlight back onto Sophia. It was easier, and it gave me the one thing I needed most: cover. While they were dazzled by Sophia's spotlight, I was building an empire in the shadows. My net worth crossed $10 million before I graduated. I celebrated alone, with a cheap bottle of champagne and a new server rack. It was the best party I never had. The launch of Aura was Sophia's Broadway debut. She rented out a minimalist art gallery in Soho. There were waiters with canapes, a professional DJ, and a wall-sized screen displaying the Aura logo, a luminous, stylized A. I wore a simple black dress, feeling like an imposter among the venture capitalists and tech bloggers Sophia had courted. She took the stage, a vision in a white pantsuit, and for a moment I felt a genuine surge of pride. This was my sister, a force of nature. Her pitch was flawless. Aura would use ethical, transparent AI to give small businesses the same consumer insights as corporate giants. It was a noble idea. The problem was, as I listened, I could already see the cracks. The technology she described didn't exist yet, not in the seamless, user-friendly way she promised. She was selling a dream, and the family was buying it wholesale. My parents had invested $250,000 of their retirement savings. My grandparents, aunts, and uncles had chipped in another $100,000. They weren't just investors, they were disciples. My father pulled me into a hug, his eyes wet. "This is it, Zara. Your sister is going to change the world." I hugged him back, my stomach a knot of dread. I'd seen the business plan. The financial projections were a fantasy. Meanwhile, Quantum Forge was my reality. My apartment was the top floor of a converted warehouse. One bedroom was for sleeping. The other was a server room that would make a data center jealous. My team of 15 worked remotely from around the globe, and our clients included 3 of the top 5 global investment firms. We were the digital SWAT team they called when their own IT departments failed. I was 24 years old, and my personal net worth was pushing $40 million. I lived a deliberately double life. When I visited my parents, I drove my Honda Civic. I let my mother fret that I was working too hard and not eating enough. I listened to Sophia's updates about her burn rate and user acquisition with a neutral expression, all while mentally calculating how long she had until the money ran out. It was about 18 months. The cracks became chasms. The ethical AI was a buggy, open-source framework they'd poorly customized. Their lead developer quit. Key partnership fell through. The family narrative, however, remained stubbornly optimistic. It was a cult of personality, and Sophia was the prophet. "It's the trough of sorrow," my dad explained, parroting a term from a startup blog. "It's a necessary part of the cycle. She'll pivot." I knew a pivot wouldn't save her. She needed a miracle. She needed an injection of capital so large it would allow her to hire real talent and fundamentally rebuild the product. She was desperately trying to raise a Series B, but savvy investors could smell the desperation. One night, I was on an encrypted call with the CTO of a Swiss bank, finalizing a security audit that had just netted me a $2 million fee. As the funds hit my account, I pulled up Aura's dwindling cash reserves. A cold, calculated idea began to form in my mind. It was audacious. It was risky. It was, in a way, monstrous. But it was also the only way to save her dream from her own hubris. And perhaps a small hidden part of me whispered, it was a way to finally prove, once and for all, who truly understood how to build something real. I opened a new browser tab and began researching the formation of Delaware C corporations. Creating Perseus Ventures was the most complex software architecture I had ever designed, but instead of code, I was building with legal entities. I became a digital ghost, a phantom in the machine of high finance. It worked like this. I was the sole owner of Odyssey Holdings, a privately held company registered in Wyoming for its anonymity. Odyssey wholly owned Meridian Capital, a fund based in the Cayman Islands. Meridian Capital was the limited partner that provided 99% of the capital for Perseus Ventures, a sleek, brand-name VC firm in Silicon Valley run by a sharp, ambitious man named Jonathan Finch. Jonathan believed he was fronting for a consortium of reclusive, old-money European investors. He never met them. He only ever communicated with me, through encrypted channels, as Z. The due diligence process was a farce in which I was investigating myself. Jonathan's team would send me questions about Aura's technology. I would have my Quantum Forge team write the technical deep dive. They'd ask for market analysis. I'd send them reports I'd commissioned from top analysts. I was both the applicant and the judge. The day the $150 million wire transfer cleared from my accounts, through this daisy chain of shell companies, and into Aura's coffers, I felt a profound and unsettling chill. I had absolute power over my sister's destiny. The first board meeting was a surreal experience. I dialed in from my apartment, my voice transformed into a calm, androgynous, digitally altered monotone by a vocal modulator. "This is Sigma," I said, the name I'd chosen for its mathematical purity. Sophia's voice was bright, effervescent. "Sigma. Jonathan. Thank you all for believing in us. We're so excited to have Perseus on this journey." She presented her plan. A massive marketing blitz, expansion into 3 new European markets, and the hiring of a 50-person sales team. It was a plan designed to burn cash, not build value. "Your plan assumes a customer acquisition cost reduction of 20% while doubling your marketing spend," I stated, the robotic tone devoid of all emotion. "The data from your last 3 campaigns shows a 15% increase in CAC. Justify the discrepancy." There was a beat of stunned silence on the line. I could almost hear her scrambling. "Well, Sigma, that's because we were using inferior channels. With the Perseus Capital, we can access premium ad inventory." It was corporate speak, a word salad with no nutritional value. I let her talk herself in circles before saying, "The projection is rejected. Revise it based on historical data, not aspirational guesses." I was the ghost, the specter at her feast. And she had no idea the entity she was trying to convince was the same sister she'd mocked for her pajama-based business. The family celebration that weekend was the peak of the irony. My father poured expensive scotch, a bottle he'd been saving for a special occasion. "To Sophia," he toasted, "and her sophisticated investors. This is what happens when you combine a Harvard education with a killer instinct." He looked at me. "Zara, you see, this is the big leagues." Sophia, glowing with triumph, elaborated. "Sigma is formidable, incredibly sharp. It's so refreshing to work with investors who aren't just money, but true strategic partners." I took a sip of water to hide my smile. "What's Sigma like?" asked my voice, innocent. "Demanding. Brilliant. They see through everything. It's like they have a sixth sense for weakness in a business plan." She looked at me, and the old familiar condescension flickered in her eyes. It's a level of strategic rigor you just don't encounter in the freelance world. And so, the narrative solidified. Sophia was the brilliant warrior, battling in the trenches with her elite comrades at Perseus. I was the civilian, safe at home, completely ignorant of the realities of war. They had no idea that the general leading the army and the civilian they were protecting were the same person. The fortress they celebrated was one I had built, and the walls they thought would protect them were mine to tear down. The 2 years following the Perseus investment were a slow-motion car crash I was forced to watch from the driver's seat. As Sigma, I was a ruthless gatekeeper, denying Sophia's most extravagant spending proposals. But she was a master of finding loopholes, of presenting essential costs that were, in reality, vanity projects. The pressure was changing her. The confident, radiant sister became brittle, sharp-edged. At family gatherings, her smiles were tighter, her laughter more forced. She talked constantly about board expectations and aggressive growth targets, painting Sigma as a relentless, unforgiving taskmaster. I'd sit there, nodding sympathetically, while inside I was screaming, "I'm trying to save you from yourself." The breaking point was the Q3 financials. I was in my office, reviewing the reports my system automatically pulled from Aura's servers. The numbers were a 5-alarm fire. Despite my blocks, she had somehow blown through $120 million of the $150 million. Revenue was flat. The game-changing AI model was still a dud. The only thing that had grown was the payroll, now filled with overpaid VPs of innovation and directors of synergy. That weekend was the fateful November family dinner. A torrential rain lashed against the windows of our parents' house. The atmosphere inside was thick with a false warmth. Sophia arrived late, looking drawn but putting on a brave face. She'd just spoken on a panel at Tech Future, and my parents were eager for a debrief. "It was incredible," she said, her voice a little too bright. "The caliber of people there. I was chatting with the founder of a unicorn that just IPO'd. He said our trajectory reminds him of his early days." It was name-dropping as a life raft. I said nothing, just pushed the food around my plate. I knew the trajectory was headed straight for a cliff. Then her eyes landed on me. It was a look I knew well, a mixture of pity and a need to re-establish her superiority, to reassure herself of her place in the hierarchy. "You know, Zara," she began, a false, sisterly concern in her tone. "It's so interesting to see the difference between the startup world and, well, whatever it is you do." The table went quiet. My mother looked nervous. "What do you mean, Sophia?" my dad asked, taking the bait. "I mean, in my world, you're accountable. Every day. To a board, to investors, to your team. There's no hiding. It's not just about being good with computers." She took a sip of wine, her gaze locking with mine. "You have to think in vectors. You have to understand market dynamics, cap tables, investor psychology. It's a completely different universe from what most people perceive as business." The condescension was a physical force. I felt my cheeks burn. "Sophia, that's enough," my mother said softly, but it was too late. She leaned forward, her eyes hard. "The thing about real business, Zara, is that you can't fake it. You either understand how to work with institutional capital and build an empire, or you're just—" She paused, letting the words hang in the air, a smirk playing on her lips. "Playing pretend entrepreneur with your little online thing." She delivered the final blow with theatrical finality. "Stop playing pretend entrepreneur. Your little online thing isn't real business." The table erupted in nervous laughter. My aunt chuckled. My dad gave an uncomfortable cough. They were complicit. In that moment, they were all laughing at me. I looked down at my plate. The humiliation was hot and sharp. But beneath it, something else was crystallizing. A cold, absolute clarity. I had tried to be the ghost, the silent savior. But she didn't need saving, she needed a lesson. I lifted my head and met her gaze. My face was a mask of calm. "Understood," I said, my voice barely a whisper. But in my mind, I was already drafting the email. The game of being Sigma was over. It was time for Zara to take control. I drove home through the storm, the windscreen wipers struggling to keep pace with the downpour. I didn't feel angry anymore. Felt focused. I walked into my office, the city lights blurred and distorted by the rain on my windows. I opened my secure terminal, logged into the Perseus master portal, and with a calm that surprised me, I began to type the email that would end her world. "Jonathan." Per our discussion and following my review of the Q3 data, my confidence in Aura's leadership and strategic direction has been completely eroded. The performance metrics are catastrophic, and the management team has demonstrated an inability to execute. Initiate immediate and full withdrawal of our $150 million capital stake. I want the funds liquidated and returned to our primary holdings by end of day Friday. No exceptions. I hovered over the send button for a single heartbeat. I thought of her smirk. I heard her voice. "Pretend entrepreneur." I clicked send. A strange silence filled the room. The deed was done. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The email triggered a pre-programmed sequence of legal and financial protocols. Default notices were automatically generated. The fund liquidation process began. Jonathan Finch, though likely stunned by the abruptness, was contractually obligated to obey. My phone rang at 9:17 a.m. on Tuesday. It was Sophia. Her voice was a fragile thread. "Zara," choke sob. Something's happening." I was at my standing desk, watching the financial markets open. "Sophia, you sound terrible. What's wrong?" "It's Perseus." The words tumbled out in a panicked rush. "They've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow." Jonathan's assistant sounded cold. "They're talking about strategic repositioning and liquidity events." I don't understand. Everything was fine." I made my voice soft, dripping with sisterly concern. "That sounds awful. But is it maybe just a routine check-in? You said they were tough but fair." "This isn't routine," she nearly shouted, her composure shattering. "This is a crisis. They're questioning everything. The model, the team, my leadership. Real investors don't do this. They're supposed to be partners." I closed my eyes, listening to her unravel. This was the consequence she had never been forced to face. "I'm so sorry, sophomore. Is there anything I can do?" No, of course not," she snapped, the dismissal automatic even in her despair. This is way over your head. Have to go. I have calls to make." The board meeting on Wednesday was an execution, and I attended as Sigma, my final performance. I listened as Jonathan, his voice stripped of all its previous collegiality, presented a damning slide deck. It was a compilation of every warning I, as Sigma, had ever given her, every rejected projection, every concern about burn rate. "The data is unequivocal," Jonathan stated. "Revenue growth is stagnant. Customer churn is terminal. The technology has not delivered on its promise. The board has lost all confidence in the current strategy and, frankly, in the leadership's ability to pivot." Sophia tried to fight. "Jonathan, Sigma, everyone. This is a short-sighted view. We're building for the long term. You're looking at trees and missing the forest. The market opportunity is." "We are not missing the forest, Ms. Johnson," Jonathan interrupted, his voice like ice. "We are observing that it is on fire. Perseus is withdrawing its entire investment. The $150 million is being recalled. Effective immediately." The sound she made was a gut-wrenching gasp, the sound of all the air leaving a dream. You can't. That will destroy the company. You'll be killing it. You'll be wiping out every other investor, including my family." "Our fiduciary duty is to our limited partners," Jonathan replied, merciless in his professionalism. "Not to a failing venture. The decision is final." The call ended. I sat in the silence of my office for a long time. I had done it. I had pulled the trigger. I felt a hollow ache, not of guilt, but of a profound, weary sadness. It had come to this. By Friday, the family was in a state of collective panic. The news had spread like a virus. Sophia's investors pulled out. Aura is finished. My mother called a family summit. "We need to be there for her," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to figure out how to help." The gathering in my parents' living room felt like a wake. Sophia sat on the edge of the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale and blotchy. She looked like a ghost of herself. She'd spent 48 hours in a futile frenzy, calling every contact, every angel investor, every rival VC. The answer was always the same. "If Perseus is out, we're out." "It's a temporary setback," she whispered, but the conviction was gone. "The model is sound. I just need one investor. One person with vision and real capital. Someone who can see past this betrayal." The family brainstormed desperately. My uncle offered to remortgage his house. My dad talked about liquidating his 401k. The air was thick with fear and delusion. And then Sophia's eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, found me. In them, I saw the last flicker of her old arrogance, a final, feeble attempt to assert dominance over the one person she still believed was beneath her. "Unfortunately," she said, her voice raspy, "what we need is someone who can write a check for 9 figures. Someone with real power in the tech world." She gave a weak, dismissive wave in my direction. "It's not something you can just learn from a coding tutorial, Zara." The room held its breath. It was the final insult, delivered from her knees. I looked around at their desperate, hopeless faces. I saw the ruin that my silent war had caused. The quiet for me was over. I took a deep breath and spoke into the tense silence. "Actually," I said, my voice clear and calm, cutting through the despair like a laser, "I might be able to help." The room froze. All movement ceased. My mother stopped wringing her hands. My father's mouth, which had been open to propose another doomed idea, hung agape. Sophia slowly lifted her head from her hands. Her eyes glazed with confusion and a flicker of annoyance. "Zara, this isn't the time for," she began. "I'm serious," I interrupted, my tone leaving no room for argument. "I've been following Aura very closely. More closely than you can possibly imagine. Have capital free. I can make a direct investment. I can write the check." Sophia managed a weak, utterly patronizing smile, the kind you give a child who says they want to be an astronaut. "Oh, Zara, that's incredibly sweet. Truly. But we're not talking about a few $1,000s to build a website. We're talking about serious money here. Millions. And it requires a deep understanding of corporate structuring, term sheets, valuation caps. It's incredibly complex." I didn't break eye contact. "I understand it's complex. Let me make a call." I pulled my phone from my pocket. It wasn't my personal phone. It was a secure, encrypted satellite phone, sleek and black. The family watched, a mixture of pity and bewilderment on their faces, as I navigated to a contacts list with only a few numbers. I selected one and put the call on speakerphone. It rang once, twice. Then a crisp, professional voice answered. "Ms. Johnson, I was expecting your call." It was David Chen, my managing director at Goldman Sachs. "David," I said, my voice all business. "I need to discuss liquidating a portion of my portfolio. I'm looking to free up around $150 million for a direct investment. A private tech startup." The air in the room vanished. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's eyes widened in pure, uncomprehending shock. "Of course, Ms. Johnson," David replied without a moment's hesitation. "Given your current asset allocation across your hedge fund and private equity holdings, that represents approximately 8% of your liquid net worth. We can structure it as a straight equity purchase or as convertible preferred shares, depending on your level of control. I'll have the term sheets drafted immediately." Sophia was staring at me as if I had grown a second head. The color was draining from her face. "Also, David," I continued, my gaze locked on my sister, "let's discuss my existing position in a company called Aura. Through the Perseus Meridian Capital vehicle, I believe I'm the majority stakeholder." "Correct," David confirmed, his voice echoing in the tomb-like silence of the living room. "Your initial $150 million investment via Perseus gives you a 52% controlling interest. You've been the primary decision-maker on all major strategic matters since the Series B round. You've received and approved all board meeting minutes, financial statements, and executive hiring proposals." I let that hang in the air for a 3 count. I could see the pieces crashing together in Sophia's mind. The demanding investor. The sixth sense for weakness. The relentless, unforgiving scrutiny. "David," I said, my voice dropping to a soft, deadly calm. "Schedule an emergency board meeting for Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Inform the current CEO, Sophia Johnson, that I will be attending." It's time I stepped out of the shadows and took personal control of my company. The silence that followed was absolute. A vacuum that sucked all sound, all hope, all air from the room. It was broken by the soft thud of Sophia's phone slipping from her limp fingers and hitting the carpet. She was shaking her head, a slow, disbelieving motion. No, she whispered. No, that's not possible. Sigma, you're Sigma. I held my phone out to her. Her hand trembled so violently I thought she might drop it. Would you like to ask him yourself? His name is David Chen. He's managed my portfolio since I was 20. She took the phone, her knuckles white. This is Sophia Johnson. Of Aura. Her voice was a broken whisper. Can you please confirm what you just said? David's voice was patient, precise, and utterly final. Ms. Johnson, Zara Johnson, is the sole beneficial owner of the Perseus Meridian Capital vehicle. The entire $150 million investment was her capital. She has had full visibility into Aura's operations, finances, and strategy for the past 2 years. She has, in fact, been your controlling investor and the final approval authority on every significant decision you have made. The persona of Sigma was used at her discretion to maintain professional distance. The phone clattered onto the coffee table. Sophia stared at me, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrific comprehension. It wasn't just the money. It was the humiliation. Every board meeting, every confident presentation, every time she had bragged about her sophisticated investors, it had all been for me. The sister she had dismissed, pitted, and mocked. You! She breathed the word, a puff of air. You're the investor. All this time, it was you. I'm the investor, I confirmed, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. The pretend entrepreneur has been funding your real business. The little online thing paid for your salvation. And now it's calling in the debt. The dam broke. Tears streamed down her face, not of sadness, but of sheer, unadulterated shame. Why? She choked out, the question a plea. Why would you do this to me? Why the charade? I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees, and looked at her. Really looked at her. Not as my triumphant sister or my defeated rival, but as a flawed, proud human being who had lost her way. Initially, I said, my voice softening, because I believed in Aura. I believed in your idea. But you were so proud, Sophia. So convinced that your way was the only way. You wouldn't have listened to your little sister. You would have seen my help as a handout, an insult. The anonymity was the only way to give you a fighting chance without your ego getting in the way. I paused, letting my gaze sweep over my stunned parents, my shell-shocked family. And now, I continued, looking back at her. Now it's because you needed to learn the most important business lesson of all. Respect isn't bestowed by a degree or a title. It's earned through competence, humility, and results. And you, Sophia, have been profoundly, publicly disrespectful to the one person who was actually writing the checks that kept your dream alive. You called me a pretend entrepreneur. I needed you to see what a real one looks like. The weeks that followed, well, they were awkward. Imagine trying to have a normal family braster when you've just revealed you're a secret multimillionaire who has been financially dominating your sister for 2 years. The air was thick with unsaid things. But this is where the story takes the turn I don't think anyone expected. Least of all me. I didn't let Aura die. That was never the point. The point was to force a reckoning. So I took control. Officially. I walked into the Aura offices on Monday. Not as Sophia's little sister, but as the owner. The first thing I did was call an all-hands meeting. I was calm. I was direct. I told them the company was on life support, but the patient could be saved with radical surgery. I fired the bloated sales and marketing teams. I shut down the lavish Soho office and moved everyone to a practical, affordable space. I installed a new CEO. A grizzled, no-nonsense operator named Maria Flores, whom I'd poached from a major tech firm. She was the anti-Sophia. Quiet, data-driven, and brutally efficient. And Sophia. I demoted her. From CEO to head of product vision. It was a humiliating fall from grace. A very public stripping of her title and authority. For the first 2 weeks, she was a ghost in the office, moving through the halls with a stunned, broken expression. She avoided me completely. But then, something remarkable happened. freed from the crushing weight of being the infallible CEO. From having to pretend she had all the answers, she began to breathe. The constant performance ended. She started talking to the engineers, really talking to them, listening to their challenges. She sat in meetings with Maria and actually absorbed the hard-nosed business advice she had previously dismissed. The Harvard MBA, when combined with genuine humility, was a powerful tool. She began to excel. She was brilliant at understanding the user experience, at envisioning the product's future. She just needed someone else to handle the boring stuff, like making sure there was enough money to pay the engineers. Within 6 months, under Maria's leadership and with Sophia's refocused creativity, Aura had a viable, streamlined product. We landed a few key enterprise clients. Within a year, we were breaking even. Today, it's a profitable, respected mid-tier tech firm. Not a unicorn, but a real, sustainable business. The problem was never Sophia's vision. It was her ego, and my family's relentless worship of that ego. As for me, I stopped hiding. I brought my parents to my actual apartment. The look on their faces when the elevator opened onto my penthouse floor was priceless. It wasn't about gloating. It was about showing them the reality they had refused to see. I showed them the Quantum Forge website, the client list, the public ones anyway, my philanthropic foundation. The recognition felt good, I won't lie. But it wasn't the main prize. The main prize was the end of the pretense. The end of the quiet dinners where my success was an elephant in the room. The end of being the family ghost. Sophia and I will never have a storybook relationship. The scars are real and they run deep. We don't do sisterly spa days. But we have something new now. Mutual respect. She runs a thriving division at Aura, and she's damn good at it. She never again questioned if my business was real. And I never again allowed anyone to assume that their path was the only valid one, or that loud ambition was a substitute for quiet, undeniable results. The pretending was over for both of us. And in its place we built something authentic, something real. So that's my story. It's a story about the power of silence, the price of arrogance, and the freedom that comes when you finally decide to stop being a ghost in your own life. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told you were just playing pretend, then you know the fire that fuels a quiet build. If you understood the assignment, hit like. Subscribe for more stories about turning quiet power into undeniable success. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that the loudest person in the room isn't always the one writing the checks. Thanks for watching. This is Zara, signing off from my very real, very profitable command center.